Who will win the starting tight end job in Dallas? All that more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. We are continuing with our previews as we get ready for training camp. Today, we are talking about the tight end position, which is going to have a lot of change from last year. So, Landon, let's start with this. How much do you think the Cowboys will miss Dalton Schultz kind of going into this year?
I think it's more than people are expecting. You know, I think that's the thing that I keep trying to tell folks, that as excited as we should be about what we've got at the position and the number of players and you know, the opportunities for multiple different starters, multiple different players, trying to get all of them on the field at the same time. Those are big shoes that still have to be filled for Dalton Schultz, who walked out this door. I mean, he had almost 90 targets last year, you know, and I think that was sort of a down year for him. Previously, he had a really big year in 2021. So I think that as excited as the Cowboys fans should be about the future of the position, there's a lot of true production that walked out the door. And is playing for Houston right now that the Cowboys, you know, have to fill. So whenever you're considering some of these, I like Ferguson, I like Schoonmaker, you know, honestly, it's going to be a concerted effort by all these guys just to kind of fill the shoes of the guy that isn't playing for the Cowboys.
Yeah, we're going to talk about what we expect from the tight end position this year, kind of the future of that position as well. But let's first talk about what we saw last year. And frankly, the tight end room was one of the strengths that the Cowboys had last year with Dalton Schultz. Pretty reliable. You had Jake Ferguson as that number 2 option. Peyton Hendershot was on the field a bunch. Even Sean McEwen got on the field. How would you grade the Cowboys tight end play from last year?
I mean, I think it was a strength of the team. I would give it an A- maybe. Yeah. I think the fact that the Cowboys had 3 and really 4 players that they felt comfortable kind of deploying in a bunch of different formations and using in a whole bunch of different ways. It gave the team a lot of versatility, especially at a point when the team struggled to kind of find stability at the wide receivers position. They were able to produce big plays with Hendershot and with Ferguson. You know, and obviously Schultz was a main cog of the offense, only next to CeeDee Lamb. So I think that you look at the versatility at the bottom underneath, and then on top, a guy that, you know, was Pro Bowl, you know, producing at a Pro Bowl level. I think that you see that a team and a group that was one of the highlights of this offense last year.
We should talk a little bit more about Dalton Schultz, because last year he was the player that, I mean, you could make an argument that he was the most trusted receiver by Dak Prescott, right? Even more so than CeeDee Lamb, because there was a lot of situations on, you know, third down in the, you know, red zone and the goal line situations where that's the guy that Dak wanted to get the ball, and just not having him kind of going forward. He was the reason why this tight end room was so productive last year. So I'm with you. I think the Cowboys are going to miss him more than you think.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, he got a kind of a little bit of a bad rap at some point for some folks, you know, just that never gave him a chance originally, and I think that felt slighted that he was able to produce or felt like that Dak, you know, produced all of his production, or he was a byproduct of Dak, that I guess to say.
Yep.
And I think that, you know, that may be the case to a certain degree, but I think that Dalton Schultz at the very least provided you with a very solid floor of production for the years that he was the starter. And I think that's not even speaking to how he was as a blocker, which I think, you know, a lot of people, you know, talk ill about, but I honestly think that he was a pretty decent blocker at different points.
He got so much better.
And I think that that's something that, you know, we're going to need to see these young guys kind of improve to even get to his level, honestly.
Yeah, I would agree. Let's talk about how the rookies played last year. Jake Ferguson Uh, Modest yardage totals, I think under 200 receiving yards.
Yeah.
But it seemed like whenever they targeted him, he made some big plays. Same with Peyton Hendershot. I keep coming back to the Jacksonville game. I think it was the first or second drive of the game. They threw basically just the ball, in the corner of the end zone. Hendershot made an awesome play. How did you think the rookies played?
I think a lot of what was really impressive was how well the offense was, kind of fit for their skill sets.
Yeah.
I think you clearly had a guy in Ferguson that you felt like if you needed to give him a pass and a dump off or a crossing route, that he was able to turn the ball upfield and then make some yardage after the catch and was able to produce that way. And then there was definitely times too that you saw him able, kind of make some catches a little bit further down the field. And then you had another guy in Hendershot who you could bring in, and he was still, valuable enough that if you needed to, you could bring him in as a blocker, as a third tight end. But then obviously he could go down the field and catch balls above the rim and make plays that, really Schultz doesn't even make so much. So I think that the thing again that we keep coming back to, and then McEwen, I think, was the guy that kind of filled in all the gaps, right?
Yeah.
Like he could block, he could line up in the backfield and play.
He just gives you a really solid floor as that, third tight end. If you need
exactly. So it allows you to have those two guys, especially Hendershot, on the roster because you need third tight ends to kind of function as a blocker. And though Hendershot could do that, that wasn't necessarily his game. But because you're able to have him on the field, you could still send him down the field and he could catch, deep passes. And I think that, as they start to improve, you're going to see them kind of fit in those roles a little bit more. They obviously will get more rounded. But I think Hendershot will kind of remain a guy that you potentially could be seeing, run up a seam, catch a deep end. Late, those are the kind of things that I think Hendershot will kind of continue to be good at.
How much can we expect these two tight ends, Jake Ferguson and Peyton Hendershot, to improve in year two? Because I know this is a position that takes a while. Do we see that improvement happen in year two, or is it usually a little bit later on in their careers?
With tight end, it's because you're playing wide receiver and offensive line at the same time. It's a hard position to learn. I think part of the reason that the Cowboys like these Big Ten offensive tight ends is that they come in, well-rounded in their games. They're not; these aren't the guys that like come in as like pass catcher only
slot receivers, right?
Yeah, they're basically just glorified big slot players. These guys have played in line. They've seen what happens in the run game. They know how to do those sort of things. So I do think that there is still continuing to be a learning curve, but I think that it helps that they've done the kind of hard to learn stuff, the trenches stuff, the gritty part. And then pass catching is just something that, it's about being an athlete and running routes. So I guess the question now becomes, how much can they improve now that they've ingested what they've experienced last year with the reps and the targets that they got. And they both experienced what I think we could call some success, and so you and I have talked about on this podcast, and every dayers have heard us talk about all this situation where young players getting the opportunity to get on the field and then see themselves on tape and understand the areas that they need to improve the next time they get the opportunity to be on the field, and what that does to kind of, quantum leap their game. I think that's something that we could see with maybe not both of these guys, but one of these guys who really has taken in a lot of what their experience was on the field and allowed that to kind of help them progress to take their game to another level, on top of the fact that, the second year jump is just something that exists and that we're going to see them take.
Just really quickly, back to the Big Ten part and why the Cowboys love these Big Ten tight ends. It doesn't mean because they draft tight ends from Indiana and Wisconsin and Michigan that they're going to come in and be really good blockers right away. But I do think they are used to the physicality that an NFL tight end has to see on a down-to-down basis, where, listen, I love the Big 12 and I love the SEC, but if you're a slot tight end and you're basically just never seeing press coverage and you're never having to take on a defensive end, it can be a huge transition when you get to the NFL, because you're basically playing a whole new position. That's just not the case for people like Ferguson, Hendershot, Schoonmaker.
Well, I think the run game is the harder part to learn, I think, as from a, in the classroom type thing, so the guys that have experience doing that and understand their jobs, and then also to understand protections and that sort of thing, those are complicated things that they have to learn. So the more experience they have in the kind of nitty gritty, look, a lot of these guys are great athletes that are big, that can run, that can catch the ball, but can you do all the things that make what makes a valuable tight end valuable? That's the ability to do all the things, because now you're a strategic piece that is on the field, that can be deployed anywhere, that can do anything that is on the field. And now the defense has to guess what your job is, and that obviously leaves them guessing all the way up to the snap.
All right, Landon, let's talk about who we expect to be the starting tight end for the Dallas Cowboys next season. All that and more in this episode of Locked On Cowboys podcast. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make your way to FanDuel, because right now new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That is $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Now, I know all the playoff action is over with the NHL finals and the NBA finals wrapping up, but there's still a ton to bet on. You can bet on baseball right now. We've got some big UFC fights coming up over the next couple of months. You can even go bet on NFL futures right now, like the Cowboys to win more than 9.5 games this season. There is no better place to bet on all of the action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That is FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are discussing the Dallas Cowboys tight end room going into the 2023 season. Landon, let's just get right to it. Who do you anticipate being the #1 tight end for the Dallas Cowboys this year?
Well, yeah, that's the question, right? I think at this point, the betting man would probably put Jake Ferguson's name down. I mean, just to be safe. He's the guy that had the most targets. He's the last year that's still on the team. And he's the guy that seems to have the combination of pedigree versus and experience, I
just think he's the most well-rounded of the three.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And I think he's shown that he's got a level of physicality and as a blocker that he can come in and do the job as well. I anticipate him taking a huge leap, and it sounds like, whispers are that he took a big leap and he looks really good.
Not only that, but he's also, I hate to use the word like reliable, because that is a lot of his game, but like he's on the field a lot. Like he played a ton at Wisconsin and didn't miss snaps. And listen, I just remember the Jason Witten story so much with Bill Parcells and kind of how his career started, where, hey, you're playing, right? Like if you're banged up, I don't care you need to be on the field. You need to be a reliable player. Even though I think Schoonmaker is more talented, I got a feeling it's going to be Ferguson that plays the most.
Look, I think the big thing here with Dak is much like Romo, and I don't know if this is offense or what it is. The tight end is the security blanket, and so reliability is a big thing here, and I think that's an important factor. And I think
trust,
right? Trust, and I think Ferguson right now is a guy that that kind of earned it to a certain degree. He has a ways to go. Again, this is something we need to keep in mind. Like this is not just Dalton Schultz's replacement has walked in. Like this has got to all get earned at training camp, and Ferguson is still a guy going into his second year, so it's not like any of these guys have earned any kind of stripes. McEwen's the only person that has a long-term relationship with Dak Prescott.
But the thing is like Ferguson has played in the most games, right? He was basically a 4-year starter at Wisconsin. He was on the field last year. Schoonmaker can't stay healthy. Like I really like the talent, but the reason why he's a 25-year-old rookie is because he's missed a lot of time, and he's already missing time with injuries. So I'm with you. I think it's going to be Ferguson.
Yeah, I think eventually, if things go right, Schoonmaker's going to take that job, just because that's the thing. Schoonmaker, he's just a more talented athlete, and I think that he has more big play potential when he gets the ball. I think there's lots of reasons that Schoonmaker was a second-round pick and Ferguson was a fourth-round pick. I think that as it stands right now, Ferguson's experience is a huge benefit, because there's not much in that room, so every little bit counts. And even McEwen, who again is the veteran of the group, it's not like he's got any like more career targets than Ferguson does at this point. So I think that you go with the guy that has the most experience and plus the pedigree. And beyond that, too, I think there are just things in his background that point to him being ready for this position and is certainly ready to do this with the help from his Robin to his Batman and Hendershot and McEwen, who is obviously a guy they trust. I think that's why when we talk about the position, we can talk about Ferguson as a starter, but I truly believe even more so than last year, it's going to be tied in by committee in the sense that they're going to need to cobble together this position with the strengths of each one of these four candidates at the position.
I agree. I think this is going to be a heavy committee, but I do think at some point the Cowboys are going to have to lean into one of these guys or just pick one of them to be kind of the guy that, hey, when we're in 11 personnel, it's this guy as our tight end. And I think it's going to be Ferguson this year. I wouldn't be surprised down the road if it's somebody else, maybe the second round pick that they spent on the guy from Michigan. Yeah. Right. But if I had to bet right now, I think it's going to be Ferguson. Now, the question is, who's the number 2 tight end? Let's assume it's Ferguson. Is that a rotating spot or is that a matchup one, or is it just who's healthy that week?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a matchup one. I do think that you've got that's the benefit of having the guys that you like, right? Is that you can use these to create a bunch of different formations and use it to attack defenses in a multitude of different ways. Do you want someone who's going to be a seam stretcher? Then put Hendershot out there. Do you want someone who's going to be great on a deep crossing route? Maybe then use Schoonmaker there. Do we need 12 to line up at 12 personnel and knock some butts on the ground? Maybe you put an offensive lineman in there. So you know what I'm saying? I think that the 12 personnel is the personnel group that I think that you're going to see the most variety in, because not only the selections, the choices that you may have in the tight end room itself, you're going to see offensive linemen in there. You may even see a running back lining up a tight end in Hunter Lupke. So I think that there is going to be a lot of variety in that personnel package, and it's going to be all 4 of the guys that are in that room, plus some other guys who might show up as well.
My last question before we kind of move on to what the future of this position looks like. Is there any part of you that would like to see the Cowboys bring in some type of veteran tight end just to have somebody in the locker room that's played more than like 400 career snaps? Because listen, we like Ferguson a lot, but that's a lot to put on a 4th round tight end who has never been into that role. Is there any part of you that wants to go out and just grab somebody to help you kind of get through training camp?
If there was a Blake Bell type that was available, like that's a guy that
I don't think Bell's available, but yeah,
no,
that type, right?
But I'm saying that type, like a big body blocking type who is a veteran. Maybe he's bounced around a little bit, just has some more experience. I mean, I think McEwen kind of serves in that role, and I think there's a lot of great chemistry in the room with him, and I think that he's beloved in there. But I also think that the one thing that you just pointed out, that there's not a lot of experience here. So just somebody who's played a bunch of NFL snaps, because even though McEwen's the veteran of the group, he hasn't played a ton. So it's not like he's, a learned vet. He's still kind of figuring it out, even though he's just a little more advanced in age than these guys. So if there was somebody that they could bring in that was, cheap or vet minimum guy that like could come in as a blocker almost exclusively.
I'm thinking of names like Jesse James, who played with the Steelers and the Lions, or Nick Boyle with the Ravens. Nick
Boyle's the name I'm thinking of totally, right? Like
Max
that
Williams,
kind of guy.
Yeah, Max Williams, who was with the Cardinals and the Ravens. Like somebody like that who you're probably not keeping on your 53-man roster, but just gives you somebody with some skins on the wall to help these young guys grow.
And someone who probably has to be able to play special teams, even though they're a veteran, So I think those are the kind of guys that just give this room a little bit of grittiness, a little bit more experience, because you got all the talent and upside you want. And we'll talk about that obviously in this next segment here.
Let's talk about the future of the Cowboys tight end position, because on one hand, there's a lot to be excited about on a very cheap salary. On the other hand, still a lot of unknowns. We will get to that next. All right, we are back here with our final segment, talking about the Dallas Cowboys tight end position, kind of going into the future. Landon, here are the cap hits for the Cowboys tight end position over the next 3 years, starting in 2023.
Okay, let's
It
hear.
is 2.8 million, 3.1 million, and then it's like 2.6 million because Peyton Hendershot's cap hit goes down. So the Cowboys are paying nothing. There's going to be no team in the NFL that is paying their tight ends less money over the next 3 years than the Dallas Cowboys. That part is exciting. How concerned are you, though, if some of these young guys don't develop?
Well, if some of them don't develop, then you're just gonna have to spend more money there. I
You're
mean,
gonna
you'll
pay
have
up,
to,
right?
you get to pay up, right? Yeah. I look. They are, insulating themselves a little bit by having numbers at the position at this point. But they had numbers at the position at wide receiver last year too, and that didn't necessarily help them fully. Now, I think the key thing here is that you're really relying on them to be the number one guy, not
Yeah.
at the wide receiver position. You had CeeDee Lamb. You were kind of having this kind of play it by numbers situation for your wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 position. But tight end, like you like these guys. You've seen Ferguson and Hendershot perform. You're expecting them to take big steps, but there's very little known here at the position, and especially at tight end 1. So you're kind of hoping that if Hendershot and Ferguson, one of them needs going to take a big step. If not, yeah, you're going to be relying on a rookie tight end or the free agent market of tight ends that may be available coming up pretty soon.
If this goes poorly and just nobody develops, I could see one of two things happening next year. Number one is you go out and you sign a tight end. How about Dalton Schultz, who's on a 1-year deal, playing with the Texans? Maybe they decide to, not repay him. Something like I could see something like that. But I think what's more likely, because of all the big contracts the Cowboys have coming up, Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, Trayvon Diggs, Terrence Steele, you guys know the names by now. You're almost going to have to just figure it out with these guys because you have to cut back on a couple positions. If you're going to be paying top 5 money to, 8 different players on your team, you've got to find somewhere to cut back. They're probably just going to hope that, hey, maybe it didn't work out this year. Let's give these guys a little bit more time. We have them under contract. I kind of get the sense, Landon, that this is going to be your tight end room for the next 2 years. And if after 2 years it's not working out, that's when you go out and sign somebody. That's when you draft somebody higher in the draft.
Oh, they're certainly relying on the position hitting. I mean, look, and I think that the thing is that they're set up well. They have other guys. They aren't going to necessarily rely on a certain type of production from any one of these guys. They have other guys to kind of supplement the production in, like I said, the running back and Lupke. Yeah. They have offensive linemen that can come in for blocking needs and stuff. And the area where you feel like they need to perform the most to kind of get your bang for your buck is the area where you feel the most confident in these guys' games. It's receiving, right? You feel you feel pretty good that Ferguson is a guy that you can get the ball, who can maybe break some tackles and make some plays. You've seen him do it, and in a very small sample size. Hendershot, you feel confident this is a guy who can make some plays down the field for you, or at least be sort of reliable in the passing game. Now, do they need to get better in that game, in that area? Absolutely, but the reason you're feeling kind of positive about the position with despite not having very much known quantities at the position, is that the kind of known quantities you have at the individual players' skill sets matches up with what's most important. So if they can just kind of continue to develop as receivers. Look, Ferguson doesn't quite develop as a blocker, and you need to struggle there. Get more offensive lineman packages in there, or maybe just more double tight ends. Don't run at him. There's ways to work around that. But I think the things that you worry about derailing the offense would be not having a tight end who can catch the football, or not having a tight end who can manage to get open. And I think those are things that we know these guys can do, at least on some level. It's just rounding out their games a little bit more, so it's not such a tell when you have Hendershot on the field that maybe you're throwing a seam route, that sort of thing.
The other thing we should remember is the Cowboys have a pretty good track record of developing tight ends. Like, we should give them a little bit of credit for all the tight ends that they've developed over the last decade.
And Linda Wells specifically
Yes.
seems to be one of the best coaches on the team.
And that's where it's like, hey, we've done this 4 or 5 other times before. Just let us, give us a little bit of patience here. And they've earned it, right? Like the development of Dalton Schultz, who was a 4th round pick, who needed a lot of work coming out of Stanford, for him to turn into a Pro Bowl caliber tight end. I wouldn't be surprised if they do it again. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
No, and like I said, it's not a matter of not having the materials. They have talented dudes. I think it's just about getting them the experience they need. Right now, that's really what they need. They need time on the grass, playing with Dak, getting the opportunity to catch footballs in the NFL. That's what they need in order to get better.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. The podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. We want to let you know that we will be off on Friday, so no podcast. But we will have a show on Monday. We're going to be answering your Twitter questions, so send them into us. You can send them to me at Marcus_Mosier, at McCoolBCB. Enjoy your long weekend, and we will see you guys next time.